Meet Mr. William Booth, a draper. Now, what, you may ask, is a draper?
Draper is a person who sells fabric. I sell fabric, patterns, and notions.
I had the pleasure of meeting with Mr. Booth at the Fort Meigs Revolutionary War reenactment in Ohio, where he taught me all about these. Thread buttons. Now that's right, these are buttons made entirely and solely out of thread. No wood, no horn, no pewter, and nothing on the inside of the things. It is quite literally just a bit of string of thread wrapped around itself to form an incredibly sturdy button. I was really quite surprised at just how strong they were. I would have assumed initially that they would bend and flex under just a little bit of pressure, or even unravel entirely if you treated them just a little bit roughly, but nothing of the sort. That is, of course, assuming that they are well made by a professional such as our Draper here. But don't just take my word for it, let's watch the master at work. I present to you how to make a thread button with Mr. William Booth, a draper.
Today I'm making these thread buttons, and these are thread shirt buttons that are used on the collars of men's shirts. In the early 19th century, we have a number of shirts that have them on the wristband, although in the 18th century it seems as though the sleeve buttons were more common on the wristband. So these shirt buttons were used on the collar of men's shirts. And I know that they were used on the collar of men's shirts because I have a reference from 1757 of Richard Saunders, who was indicted for stealing 12 dozen of thread buttons for shirts. That's a direct quote from the Proceedings of the Old Bailey in London. These were made as a cottage industry in England, exported around the world. And in 1782, Patrick Crockall was indicted for stealing 3,420 dozen of thread buttons, value over 22 pounds. To make these thread buttons, it's really easy. You need some beeswax, 16-2 linen thread. It's a little bit heavier linen thread, which I find from looking at original shirts seems to be heavier than the thread used to make the shirt itself. Pair of scissors, tapestry needle. Tapestry needle has a very tiny eye and a blunt tip. You don't need a sharp needle to do this. And a button stick. If you don't have a button stick, you can use a knitting needle, a heavyweight knitting needle. But take about a yard or so, an arm's length or so of, this is the way the wax starts. Mine looks like that, so it gets pretty nasty looking. But I like to wax the thread fairly well. And the reason I like to wax it fairly well is because now, on my button stick, I'm going to start right about here. I'm going to end right about there. You don't want to go too close to the top because you'll lose your hole. You need to have that center hole. And I'm going to wrap 35 times. When I started doing this, I thought that this part was for a big button, that was for a small button. It's not the case. When I look at originals, oftentimes the center hole of the button is filled. It helps it so it doesn't want to collapse. So I'm going to wrap it 35 times. So that's one. I'm going to cross the thread so that it locks it in place. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. It doesn't have to be neat. It's all going to be concealed on the inside. So as you can see, I started down here, worked my way there without losing that center hole. Now I'm going to pull this off. The rest of this doesn't have to be waxed much. But I'm going to go ahead and pull this off. When I do that, I don't want to lose that center hole. So I push it off and smush it. And because it's all, so I'm cutting about an arm's length, maybe a little bit more. So now I've got my thread for my button. because it's all waxed, it all sticks together without losing that center hole. Thread the needle is really easy because of the big eye on this needle. So I thread my needle. Don't get the tail of the needle, of the thread, caught into your work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the back side, right through the center hole, and I'm going to take the thread off the button, not the thread off the needle, the thread off the button. Everything goes clockwise. So I wrap it around one time clockwise, bring it off to the side, and pull it tight. When you pull it tight, you want to pull it almost to the breaking point of the thread. By doing that, you get a nice hard button so it won't collapse on itself. That's the big problem with these buttons, is if they collapse on themselves, they just don't stay buttoned. So everything goes clockwise. So I wrap it around clockwise once, pull it off to the side. When I do that, I lay that next knot right beside the one that was first there. And then I just repeat that process all the way around the button, going clockwise. Since everything goes clockwise, if I ever get sidetracked, I can just go ahead and drop the button. I can pick it up again, and I know that I'm going clockwise around, so I know exactly where I left off, and I can get right back to that work. So if you notice, I'm not pulling from the needle. If I pull from the needle, the thread, it takes a lot of stress on the thread right there, and it'll eventually break the thread. So I'm pulling down here and taking the thread off the needle, going around clockwise once. That's called a buttonhole stitch. I'm almost getting that tail stuck in, so I'm going to pull it. So I shorten that tail just a little bit. And I'm just going to go all the way around the button. After you get a few stitches on, if you notice that the button isn't round, you can shape it with your needle and make it a round button. The other thing is that I found that as I was teaching people how to do this, oftentimes people want to hold the button like this. If you hold the button like that, you're going to squish it and end up with an oval. So what I find is I put two fingers behind and my thumb on top, and that way I'm always crushing the button flat. So I've gone all the way around. At this point, there is no need to make a shank on the back of this button. There's no need, because you can simply take it, bring it to your shirt, sew it directly to your shirt, and you can go anywhere into the back of the button, catching a thread on the back of the button to attach it to the shirt. If you want to put a shank on it, find two threads directly across. And again, pull it tight, turn it 180 degrees, grab another two threads, and pull it tight again, turn 180 degrees. So I've got three threads across the back. And then once again, you're pulling that tight, and then you can put your needle underneath, making sure that I kind of bring my needle down and up, so I've got all three threads across the top. And then I take the thread off the button, clockwise one time around, and then pull it so the knot is right there on the end. And then bring it right across the back, creating that shank. Now, the reason that I wanted to pull it tight to begin with is because I'm pulling on that shank every time I put these threads on there. But when I do that, if the back threads aren't tight enough, what will happen is the thread, the shank will grow as you're pulling on it, and you'll get this really big shank. So you want to make sure it's tight. Now, everything on this button is tied in knots, so there's no need to finish it off. But if you want, right at the end, you can force the needle into the side of the button, bring it through, and then cut it off. And you've got a nice button there. You can crush this in your fingers and it won't fold in half. It'll stay really nice. My unicorn here, I'm very proud of my unicorn. My unicorn is the unicorn for the draper, because a unicorn was a very old symbol for a linen draper. And wool draper often had a wool sack, which I didn't think people would be able to relate to. But a unicorn, and this is taken from the King's coat of arms, God Save the King.
I'd like to thank Mr. Booth for his generosity in sharing both his time and knowledge with myself and all of us. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about Mr. William Booth Draper, or purchase any of his fine and authentic 18th century clothing materials, guides, or finished products, I'll include a few links in the description down below on exactly where you can find him. I would also like to thank my ever-beneficent supporting classes on Patreon.com, for it is with their support that I am able to carry on with the work that I do. And thank you all, of course, for watching, and until the next time, my dear viewer, I am, and I shall remain, your most humble and obedient of servants.